Throughout the election campaign, we've spoken a lot about each party's spending plans. And today, the Institute of Fiscal Studies is warning that public finances are at risk of spending cuts, whoever wins.
Let's talk to Carl Emmerson. He's the Deputy Director of the IFS, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and joins us live this morning. Carl, morning to you. Thanks for getting up early on a Sunday morning to talk to us. There's been quite a lot of claim and counterclaim and lots of uncertainty around spending and around tax. Do you think we have a clear picture as an electorate about what is likely to happen, regardless or depending on who's elected on July the 4th?
I think we're a long way from having anything like a full picture. I think the reason is that if you look at the Conservative Party manifesto or the Labour Party manifesto, it talks about what changes they would like to make to tax, to welfare and spending, and they claim that those sets of figures kind of add up in the sense that there are some takeaways and some giveaways. But what that's not confronting is the kind of underlying public finance situation, the fact that if you were to put in your manifesto that you weren't going to make any changes to tax, any changes to spending, and then you got elected, what you'd find is you inherit a situation where taxes are set to go up. And actually, there's going to be pretty big cuts to many areas of public spending just to make the government's existing plans add up. And those sums are pretty big relative to the details of the policies that both the Conservatives and Labour are promising in their manifestos. So we could be talking about cuts to investment spending and cuts to day-to-day spending on public services, somewhere in the magnitude of £30 billion, if you don't make any other changes. And I think it's fair to say that neither main party is really confronting that issue.
And the main parties, the Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats, have all pretty much ruled out increasing income tax, increasing VAT, the main sort of tax income streams. So if they're not going to put those up, just explain, is it therefore inevitable that cuts will have to come?
It's not inevitable. It's not inevitable. There are many choices the government can make after the election. They could choose to put some taxes up. They could put up other taxes that they've not made commitments on. They could choose to cut spending in unprotected areas. You could do that. I think it's worth saying that many public services are already struggling. So making cuts is not going to be painless. We're talking about cuts to areas like further education or the justice system, areas that were cut pretty hard during the 2010s. Or you could choose to borrow more. You could choose to say, look, we're going to allow debt to rise for longer. They're all options on the table. What we're not hearing from those seeking office is which of those options they would be looking to take. What does their plan A look like? Would they be looking to put up taxes? Would they be looking to make, yes, more cuts? Or would they be content to see debt rise for longer? So that plan A is missing. And I think we're also missing a sense of, well, what happens if the world ends up a bit different to what we expect? Surely a lesson from the last few years is bad shocks come along. And I think we really need to know what their instinct is for how they would respond to those kinds of shocks.
Just for the benefit of people at home and for people who don't know, you mentioned there, you talked about cuts to unprotected areas. Can you just explain to people what are protected areas, I guess, because there are fewer of those?
Well, the situation is where the current government have set out plans where day-to-day spending of government set to rise on public services by about 1% a year above inflation. So you might say, well, there's no cuts there, 1% a year, that's an increase, that's all great. The problem is that we know that the NHS is going to get more than that, an ageing population, desire to bring down waiting lists. We know that defence will get more than that. We're likely to be increasing defence spending quite quickly going forwards. We're certainly not going to be cutting it. Big increases in childcare that both Conservatives, Labour and other parties have all signed up to. That doesn't come for free. And there's also some commitments on areas like schools and also on overseas aid. So those kind of areas are likely not to be getting cut and in many cases getting big increases in spending. And what that means is that the rest of government, to make that overall envelope add up, would have to see its budget squeezed. And as I say, that leaves services like further education, like the courts, like prisons, where, yes, you can do cuts if you want, but they're public services that really are struggling on many measures.
Carl, thank you very much indeed for talking to us this morning. We're really grateful. Carl Emmerson there from the Institute for Fiscal Studies.
Later on in the programme, after 8 o'clock this morning, we've got a couple of political commentators who'll talk us through the sort of twists and turns of the election campaign over the last week and what we're likely to see next week. Worth bearing in mind, postal votes have already arrived and are being posted currently. So a good chunk of the voting population, something like 20%, have postal votes and will already be casting their ballots.